Tuesday. I know we've surprised so many of you by releasing this on a Tuesday instead of a Monday, but since so many holidays are on Mondays, and since you guys seem to listen to us more on Tuesdays, we thought it would just be a better choice to rejig our weekly release. So here we are. Happy Tuesday. This week, we have one of my most favorite people, Rachel, who was a patient of mine for approximately a year and a half, who was one of the very early enthusiasts of an Instagram account that I started in January 2023 that focused on your fertility stories and was actually the very beginning, the seed that started this podcast. And it was Rachel's enthusiasm that would often keep me going because she was getting so much hope and was progressing so much with her own mindset simply by finding stories that were like hers on the page, which in this podcast, I'm hoping that you can find instances in the various stories that we release where you can find an example that will hold true to you and then will give you that little light, that little spark. So as we head into the holidays, I know it's a very hard time for so many of you. And so we're going to be releasing more stories, more podcasts that focus on mindset and help therapeutically get you through the holidays. Because whether your transfer has been postponed, whether you are watching on Instagram as everybody, reveals that they are now expecting, whether you are at gatherings and you're surrounded by baby bumps, we, specifically me, want to be here for you to be that place of comfort where you can return, put your headphones in and feel like you have a friend in a safe space. So without further ado, a very inspiring story of perseverance and hope. Here we have Rachel.
So this is a full circle moment.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I started putting together on Instagram the Your Fertility Stories account,
Mm-hmm.
and you were my most avid fan. And the number one person asking me when I was going to release a new part of whatever story it was that I was doing. And I remember thinking her story is going to be really good. I can't wait until we get to release it. I know it is a bit of a sad story, but it has a good ending. I promise. He literally just
surprise,
smiled.
surprise, happy ending.
Yeah. So I'm giving away the ending by sitting here with your child.
Mm-hmm.
It also feels like I've kind of stolen him from you. But here we are in a safe space. And he wore a matching outfit.
Yeah. It's not figs, but it's close.
God. Okay. So, as I promised, I'm mostly not going to be doing all of the talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask where you think your story should begin, and then we'll take it away from there.
So I think it starts when my husband and I decided we were going to start trying to conceive. And the very first month where we tried, I got pregnant. I was looking back, I was kind of worried because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be one of those stories where it happened on the first try and people are going to hate that. But of course, that's not how it went. Went in for the blood test and found out that it was a chemical pregnancy. I knew a lot of people that had chemicals, so I knew it was very normal and common. So I was like, okay, we have our little blip in the process and now we're going to move on and everything's going to be fine. So we continued on and tried again the next month and got pregnant again. And it turned out to be another chemical again.
You got pregnant back to back.
Yeah.
So chemical to chemical.
Chemical to chemical.
And how old were you at
32.
That point? Okay, so
I had
just
the
a
first
baby.
chemical on my 32nd birthday. And then the second one was the next month. So I went to see my doctor and he's like, it's a bit weird. Chemicals are very normal, but let's just get you into a fertility clinic just to get things checked out since it was back to back and the exact same thing. And you never know how long it takes with their wait lists at clinics. So he asked if we had one in mind, but we were so new to everything. We were just like, just get us into whichever clinic will be the fastest, because we were so eager at that point.
Were you worried?
I wasn't that worried because, like I said, I know a lot of people that have had chemicals and even multiple, but it was just weird that it was 2 months back to back. And the first blood test was good, and it was always the second blood test where it went down.
And how high was the first one?
It was low.
Right.
So even after the first blood test, they called and they said it's likely not viable. But then I was always too optimistic, I guess, and thought, oh, I'm going to be the one where it skyrockets next time. So we got into a fertility clinic. It was a pretty large one. And we had an appointment with the doctor on the phone. And we still had gone on to try that month when we had the appointment. So when we were talking to the doctor, I just said, what were to happen if I became pregnant this month again before we do any of this testing that you want? And he said, just come in and we'll do the blood tests here instead of through your doctor. And then the next day, I found out I was pregnant again for the third month in a row. So went in for a blood test, went in for the second, and magically this time it went up. So I thought that was it. That was my bad luck. It's passed, and now we can move on. So everything continued going okay for a bit. We had a 7-week ultrasound, heard the heartbeat, and thought we're in the clear now. And at the 9-week ultrasound, and actually my husband was away because we were so confident. I was like, oh, I could do this ultrasound without you, no problem. And at that ultrasound, found out that there was no longer a heartbeat. And not to turn it into a thing about the clinics, but the clinic just was really terrible about it. They took, I think, 7 or 8 hours to call me with the news that it didn't have a heartbeat anymore, because it was just too big of a clinic. It just wasn't a good experience. And even when I finally got the call from the doctor confirming it, nothing was ever a straight answer. He was like, oh, we'll put you on the pills to get rid of the pregnancy. And I was kind of asking, like, do we have to do this? And I just wasn't really getting a straight answer.
So you went in, they didn't say anything during your ultrasound?
Yeah.
And then they called you.
Yeah. But because the technicians aren't allowed to say anything, but it was kind of obvious that something was wrong. So I was asking if I could see the doctor there, and they're like, you're going to have to wait. And I was like, I'll wait. But they kind of pushed me out the door and said, you'll get a call later. So that was obviously traumatizing, and to go through the loss and having to deal with all of that, I thought it would be over. And then when I went back in for an ultrasound again, there was still some retained products of conception. So I had to do another round of the pills, and then 2 weeks later, still retained products. So it was basically the miscarriage that was never ending. After 2 more weeks, I had to get a D&C.
I feel like that's like the most common misconception about miscarriage is that when you go in and you find out you're going to miscarry, you're told, oh, it's going to be a heavy period.
Yeah.
You will probably bleed through, a few more pads than usual, but it wouldn't be anything that beyond what you've already experienced with a regular period. And that's, at least in my experience, was not the case.
Yeah.
Similar to yourself, I had multiple months of just waiting for my HCG to drop.
Yeah.
For the
it's like at that point
to release.
Yeah.
If it did, if I didn't need another D&C.
Yeah. And at that point, I think I was miscarrying longer than I was pregnant. So it was horrific. And we were just treated really badly by the clinic because it was just too big and we weren't able to talk to the right people ever. So at that point, we're just like, we need to switch things up and try somewhere new. So we found a much smaller clinic and switched over there. And once I got my period after the miscarriage, we could start with all the testing at the clinic since we never ended up doing it at the first one anyways. We were feeling a lot better. We were really happy with the clinic because we were treated like people and not like a number on a file.
Yeah.
So we did all of our testing and unfortunately found out that I had low AMH, which I know you talk about all the time.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So everything else was pretty much normal. I think just also thought that now I'm forgetting all the names of the phases, but that progesterone might be an issue too, and that might have led to chemicals.
Yeah, luteal phase defect.
But that was just a potential, not sure. And then we also found out that my husband had elevated DNA fragmentation, which is another topic that you love.
These are literally all of my favorite things to discuss. This is actually my ideal day.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here with a baby.
Talking about your two favorite things.
One of my most favorite people. Actually, I told someone already today that you were my favorite January Aquarius. And now she's going to listen to this because I know she listens to this. And she's going to see you.
Oof.
Oh,
it's
God.
A big reputation to live up to.
So I've got like coffee, a baby, and now we get to talk about low AMH and DNA fragmentation.
Yeah. Yeah. So so based on those results, the doctor recommended that we do IVF to try to bank some embryos. And just based on everything we had gone through already, we were completely in and ready to do that. Even though we weren't trying for that long, it felt like a million years. And she said that this happened, we got the results in August, and she said that we could get in with the Ontario funding in October, but we could still try in the meantime before we started IVF. So, and then in September, the month before we were going to start IVF, I got pregnant again and ended up finding out that it was an ectopic. So I called your office back and said, I need to talk to Anne and we need to start this plan from scratch. And that's when we got closer, I guess, because you helped me try to figure out how to get through the ectopic.
You were one of my first calls, actually. I didn't used to ever do calls with patients.
So honored.
Honest to God. And
I kind of demanded. I was like, you have to let me talk to her. I'm like going to the hospital for an ectopic now.
Yeah. I think it was like I was supposed to see you. And then you let, I think, who was it? Gabby? No, Janine. You let Janine know, like, oh no, I won't need my appointment.
Yeah.
Because I'm pregnant. And then you emailed back and you were like, never mind, I need to call.
Help me. Yeah.
He actually knows when it's not the happy
when it's
part.
a sad part of the story. Yeah. So we had to go to the hospital. Luckily, because we were at the clinic, they spotted it really, really early. I think I was only 5 or 6 weeks when they could tell that it was ectopic. We went to the hospital and the hospital said, we can't tell it's an ectopic, so you need to go home and come back in 2 weeks. And I kind of freaked out at that point, and I'm like, I'm not going home to let something potentially rupture inside my body.
So they knew it was an ectopic because you had your HCG was not doubling.
It was staying really low, and I think also the progesterone levels were being weird.
But when they did an ultrasound, did they saw there was nothing in the cavity?
There was nothing in the cavity, and I forget if they could see the slight something in whichever fallopian tube it was, but
it's always tough at that stage.
Because it was really small still.
It was very small, and sometimes it's fluid that they see, but sometimes they think it's potentially, if it's close to the ovaries, it can be mistaken as like an ovarian cyst when it's actually an ectopic pregnancy. And those ones are pretty tricky because you never know how fast or slow a cyst is going to grow as well.
Yeah.
So it's hard to monitor. So, okay, so you had the monitoring at the clinic. The hospital couldn't help us.
Yeah. So we called our doctor back and said that the hospital sent us home, and she was basically like, no, that's unacceptable. And she told us to go to a different hospital, and luckily there they confirmed it and gave me, I always forget the names of the shots, the
Methotrexate.
yeah.
Can't say it properly.
The shot.
Methotrexate.
Yes. And I found out then that like you're not able to try for 3 months, which was pretty devastating too at that point, because we just everyone going through this just wants it to happen, but being pushed off a bit, it was just really tough. So yeah, then we had a nice little 3-month pause. It ended up being nice. We went on a couple vacations. My husband had to travel for work, so I went with him and just recovered then with the plan to start at the end of the 3 months on the first round of IVF.
Yeah, it's hard because at that point you can't even take folate.
Yeah.
You can't take folic acid. I do remember during our call, I was like, normally I discuss supplements at this point, but you can't take anything.
I couldn't take anything. I had to just stop.
Like, what? So, but you started coming for acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
You were the most eager little beaver.
Yeah, I came, I think, every week. And at that point, you were helping make sure that
Yeah, we were working on
the ectopic would go away.
And also the so acupuncture specifically, because we knew that you were going to be going into IVF, helps lower FSH and increase AMH, which is really helpful for ensuring that stems have a better place to start, because you don't want to ever go into stems with really high levels of FSH. But I don't think that was ever necessarily a concern.
I think I had slightly elevated FSH, but it wasn't like a scary level.
Your periods were still very regular.
Yeah.
And you were obviously ovulating.
Yeah, I always pretty much had a very routine, like 28-day cycle. When I tracked my ovulation, it was always like the beautiful, perfect curve.
Yeah.
So it all just came as more of a surprise because I just always thought everything was working perfectly.
The thing that always stood out to me too, though, is that you guys were such a combined couple. And what I mean by that is, even though a lot of the time partners will have fragmented sperm and they'll have very poor quality in terms of like low numbers of count, but also like progressive motility will be low, the male half of the equation will often just rely on IVF. And the idea, like, well, we're doing ICSI, so it doesn't even really matter.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't do anything to help, and they don't do anything to prepare, which is so infuriating because more and more research is coming out that frag matters so much when it comes to euploid quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like your husband was always so on board.
Yeah, I forget at what point he started the supplements, but whenever you're like, put him on this nice mash of supplements, he came in to acupuncture a number of times, stopped drinking, stopped hot tubs, jacuzzis, baths, Peloton, all of that.
I had this patient today who said that she came home early from work and her husband was on the Peloton. I was like, this is almost like an affair
like
scene.
hiding it, yeah.
I'm like picturing you coming in the door and he's guiltily on the Peloton. I was like, did you shove him off?
Yeah.
She was like, no, I'm not insane.
He was just strapped in so he wouldn't even go anywhere.
Literally. I was like, I guess you could have just checked his app too. She was like, and if I check his app now and see how many times he's been on this Peloton, it's like the ultimate affair.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah. Because like the women are working so hard to fix it. So it's always sad when the men won't.
I know. Well, I threatened to go and steal it, as I often do. But I've only ever like successfully stolen real bikes because they're left outside the house.
Yeah.
Now all the people are listening. They're going to be like, she steals?
Yeah. And they'll be like, that's where my bike went.
That's why I moved to Oakville, guys. I had to run from the popo. Kidding. Anyway, back to your story.
Yeah. So we were starting IVF in January. And I had probably too high expectations going into it because I knew the only people I knew that had done IVF had it go really well. And I was still pretty naive at that point. So I thought we're going to do one retrieval, get some embryos, do a transfer. We were doing our retrieval in January. I was like, oh, so we could do a transfer in February and I could be pregnant by March. Did not happen that way. Obviously, because of the low AMH, I didn't get that many eggs. I think we ended that round with one embryo and we froze it and sent it off for testing because of all the losses already. And because we had that momentum going already, our doctor suggested, like, let's just jump right into a second retrieval. So we did that. We were already in the flow of doing the stims. So we just thought, like, let's just get it over with. And we were able to do it financially. So started another round. And from that one, got nothing, got zero. We got eggs, but nothing by the day 5. So I think at that point, we're just like, maybe we should take a step back from this for a couple months.
What was your husband's frag at that point?
It was just, I don't remember the levels, but it was like just above the level where,
Like just slightly above 15%?
yeah.
I know different clinics have different cutoffs. Some of them are 15, and I think Hannum's is 20. No, New Life's is 20, and Hannum's is 15. I don't know what the clinic was that you were at.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure.
15 is like the World Health Organization. That's their cutoff. So I always think it's interesting when the clinics are like, the world agrees on 15, but we will accept 20.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really, I don't think even after the second round when you didn't have any embryos, it still wasn't really a focus. Like
the frag.
The sperm factor, like, was very much on you.
Yeah.
And when you were at the clinic, you were very much taking it all in.
Yeah. Like, because he was already doing all of the things that he could possibly be doing.
Yeah.
That was it.
I know.
Yeah.
You were so convinced at that point, like, because IVF was not able to work well.
Yeah.
What will?
Yeah. So we just wanted to take a step back because it felt useless to jump into a third round. So we did a couple months of IUIs. I think we did a non-medicated one and then a medicated one. And then on our third medicated IUI, I started responding really well. And I think I had like 7 follicles. So at that point, they're like, maybe we should switch this to a retrieval round. But when they tested my estrogen, it wasn't high enough. So we continued with the IUI, but it wasn't successful.
It was like 50%. It was about like 3,500.
I don't remember.
I know. I
You remember?
I surely do.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking, like, okay, well then if it's 3,500, at least 3 of those follicles should be mature.
Yeah.
So
we all thought, like,
if we're going to get
IUI, pregnant with multiples?
Like,
There's
my
so
God,
many.
Yeah.
But did not get pregnant. And at that point, it was kind of like, that was a weird one because there were just so many follicles. So it was weird that nothing happened, even another chemical. So at that point, we started considering going back to IVF again.
I think at that point, that sort of was my clue, though, because the IUI stims that you were on were less than what you were.
It was lower
on for your retrievals, and you were responding better, which is something I see a lot with patients with low AMH. They respond better to like a min stim than really jacking their stims. Like a standard dose for my patients with low AMH, like AMH of less than 5, for example, is like 300 gonal and like 150 menopur, as just an example. And then when they drop the stim dose, a lot of the time, not only will they have more mature follicles, but their estrogen levels will look better. I think at that point, just in terms of since this is our fertility journey, I was like, no, don't go back.
Yeah.
Because when you began, I was like, let's do this. IVF for the win. But then at that point, I was like, no, look, you're doing so much better with this like low stim.
Yeah. So it felt weird to even take this step back from IVF to IUI. So I think we just wanted to keep like powering forward, and we thought like it had to work. And at that point, when we were going to gear up to do it again, you suggested some other meds to throw into it, which our doctor was on board with. So we added in, I forget the name of it. You all
Sizing.
Yeah.
My beloved.
Yeah, we added that in. And over the summer, we started up to do one retrieval, but it wasn't looking great. So switched to an IUI and then started up for a retrieval again. And I think at that one also got 0 embryos. And now I forget the order of it. We might have at that point done the transfer for our one tested frozen embryo because we're just like, what are we saving this for?
Yeah, the rationale for that was that we thought if we, like, I'm using we.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Somebody get me a therapist. We Laura Reisman, I need you. Paging Laura Reisman. Essentially at that point, the rationale was that you were gonna get pregnant and then Mitch would have 9 months.
Yeah, to still work on the DNA.
Continue to work on his sperm.
Mm-hmm.
And that was honestly, I was like, okay, so this is how that's going to go.
Yeah. And we were all pretty positive because we're like, oh, it's tested. It's fine. And my lining's always been good.
Yeah.
And
like you can get pregnant, no problem.
Yeah. And that. So we did the transfer and it didn't take. So then I think we're just, let's do one last ditch effort. I think we mixed up the meds again and did a 4th retrieval. And we ended with 2 embryos on day 3 and decided to do a fresh transfer because we didn't know if they would make it till day 5 because my embryos weren't making it till day 5.
Yeah, they're more delicate
Yeah.
outside of the body. More energy inside to continue their journey.
Yeah. That's what you had said at the time too. So we transferred both embryos and it did not take again. And at that point, it was kind of just like crushed every last bit of optimism I had. And no one ever said anything, but I was kind of at that point like, do we start talking about donor sperm? Do we start talking about donor eggs? Something's not working here. We've tried 4 rounds of IVF. It's too much.
Like 4 rounds of IVF, 3 rounds of IUI.
Yeah, more. We had like rounds. A bunch of IUIs. Yeah.
And then the infamous call.
Mm-hmm.
The second infamous call.
Yeah. My husband and I, we decided to take a step back. It was like coming up to the holidays. We wanted to go with our families to Florida. And we were pretty down and had mostly thought we were giving up.
I was not under that impression.
We felt very down. Maybe like we were going to take a month or 2 off and then reassess what the next steps were. But
I was like, we're trying
when we
spontaneous conception.
When I spoke to you, you're like, give me 4 months and let me mix up your supplements.
I beg.
And after 4 months, you can do whatever you want, but just listen to me for 4 months.
That's it.
So we listened. We listened to you, changed up all the supplements. I think you put us on more anti-inflammatory supplements.
Yeah, you were taking so much fish oil, it was obscene.
Yeah.
Although it was like fake fish oil. It was the plant fish oil.
Everything, it was disgusting. And like the fish oil was gross and taking like 20 supplements a day. But then on the second month of your 4-month plan, ended up getting pregnant. and it stuck. And he's here.
That whole span of time, though, when you were going through the 3-month wait, when you were recovering from the methotrexate, can I not say that? And then for the IVFs and then all the IUIs, and you were so good about coming to Acu. You were taking your supplements. You were eating relatively well. Relatively well.
I'm not a great eater, but I'll take
terrible.
it.
You were one of the only patients who, through that much, you at no point at least said to me, like, when can I stop doing this? Like, when am I going to stop taking all of these? And when am I going to stop putting my life on hold? And I really believe that that was key to your success, because even though, like, in your heart, you were probably crushed so many times, it was never like the way that you were living in order to get pregnant was this massive inconvenience. And it felt like it was just part of your routine. Like you made it part of your routine until you had success. Like I never felt like, even when you were crushed and down and out, which I'm just learning about at this moment, I never felt like you actually were down and out.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, taking the supplements and all of that for me was the easy part. It was more like the rest of your life that was harder, like all the socializing and everyone around you being able to get pregnant really easily, and all of that was a lot harder. So like going to the clinic and coming here and taking supplements, that was just routine.
yeah.
It was more so like all the other aspects that were like really affected.
From that perspective, like, was it the holidays? Was it like social gatherings? Or was it finding out through the grapevine or social media that people that you knew were pregnant? And like, how did you cope?
Probably not well.
Honest to God, I'm stunned.
I isolated a lot. Like I needed to be alone to recharge my battery versus my husband liked socializing to feel better for him. So we were just different in that part. We both needed to do our own thing to feel better. So yeah, I isolated a lot at home, and
You withdrew.
yeah.
Did you just like watch reality TV?
Yeah.
And just that would,
I still like saw friends, but it got too hard to see people who were pregnant. So then the friends that I was able to see, the number lowered because people were getting pregnant and it was just too hard.
yeah.
I still tried my best to keep relationships up over text and calls, but it's hard. And when you're at your lowest and people are getting pregnant and at their happiest, it's hard to, even though you are happy for them, to show that you're happy for them.
In terms of when people are coming here and sharing, that's what I think is the hardest for people, because they always give me the context of like, I am so happy for this person, but I am so sad for myself.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they don't want to be a burden, like their sadness,
Yeah.
which, if you've never been through infertility or you don't know, everybody knows someone who's been through infertility, they just don't realize it. But if you don't spend a lot of time around people who are going through fertility, or fertility challenges rather, you don't realize that like it's not that people aren't happy for you and sad for themselves and that's it. It's that they feel a tremendous amount of guilt about not being ecstatic for somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that the combined like depression that you're going through, and then this isolation, and then this guilt is like the most ultimate trifecta of like just bringing somebody into the lowest of lows.
Yeah.
I really didn't know. I didn't know that you, because you were too busy withdrawing. My God. I like remember I sent you all of those cookies for your birthday. And
Yeah, just for me.
now I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
She was at home watching reality TV
Yeah,
eating
well,
the cookies.
It helped.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Like anti-inflammatory Craig's cookies.
Mhm.
Good grief. They are not anti-inflammatory. Just for those of you who are like, amazing, I'm going to order them right now. But from like your perspective of when you were reading the stories about other people who were going through fertility challenges and then came out on the other side, did you believe that you would come out on the other side?
I believed I would come out of the other side in one way or another. Especially at that point in the journey, I didn't know if it would be through having a baby with my egg and my husband's sperm. Like, I know there are so many other ways. And I knew that we would get there through one of those ways, but I was losing hope on.
When you found out you were pregnant, like, what was that journey? I know, but I feel like I've shared too much about our journey.
It was because taking pregnancy tests becomes so hard. Everyone who's gone through it has their own ways of doing it to try to minimize the hurt, I guess. So I woke up and took a pregnancy test. And at that point I was kind of just like, it's going to be negative. I think I delayed the pregnancy test a day or two because I had plans with friends. And I was like, if I take it the day that I'm supposed to, it's going to ruin my plans. So I'll wait until after. And woke up, took the pregnancy test, flipped it upside down, went to make a coffee. And then I was like, I'm just going to go get this over with and it's going to be negative. And I flipped it. And there was a heavy line, like heavier than I ever had before. When I sent it to you, you said that too. And when I ran to Mitch to show him, we were both just in shock and then needed to take a step back and be like, we have a long way to go.
I know, I hated the cautious optimism. That January text.
Yeah, you were freaking out, and I was like, let's calm down.
I thought it was
I have a history of chemicals. This
Happiest
is likely
Sunday of my
going
life.
away. Yeah. It was a Sunday.
Yeah, I remember. It was in January. Yeah. It was a solid line. I was like, well, there we go. We're done.
Yeah. It was solid.
And you were like, no, this is when the journey begins.
Yeah.
You must be cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. The first 3 months was almost as hard as the 2-year journey to get there, because every time we made a milestone, it just felt like, oh, well, it's going to be taken away at the next one, especially getting to the 9-week ultrasound, which is where we had that miscarriage the first time. So it was very hard in those 3 months. And I probably withdrew even more because I was like, oh, if I see people now and I don't drink, like, they're going to assume I'm pregnant. But like, I didn't even want people assuming I was pregnant because it was just too hard to go through that again if it was going to be a loss. So we didn't even tell anyone other than our parents until we were able to do the genetic testing and it came back all clear. And at that point, we kind of took our first breath and we're like, okay, maybe this will work.
Yeah, I remember you had mutual friends who were coming to see me. And I was like waiting for them to mention
tell
it
you
to me. And they didn't.
Yeah.
So I was like,
well, you said it once, you almost gave it away, but didn't.
I was like, yeah, now that she's feeling better. And then saw the confusion. I was like, from food poisoning.
Yeah.
I think once you got to like the 12 weeks, you were able to like settle in. Did you think it was going to, once you got there, were you like, okay?
No.
The
12-week was
12-week was
a breath of fresh air, like a little bit of relief. But then it was like, okay, well, now we need to get to the anatomy scan. And then after the anatomy scan, it was another relief. But it was like, bad things happen all the time. And sadly, on your podcast too, like, we hear sad stories of people losing their babies at all points. So we just, even until he was born, I was like, the day before I had him, I was like, it's still something's going to go wrong.
You were thinking that?
Yeah.
And yet so
It
cute
messes,
in your
losses
overalls.
mess you up.
You were so, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was just like focusing on your cervix. I'm thinking about how he was going to pop out of you like a champagne cork.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it went, right? Just like easy little
No.
pop.
Well, there was a part when, like, in labor where his heart rate was doing some funny things. And even then, I'm like, this is it. Like, we're going to lose him now. And then once he came out and everything was fine, that was the first time where I was like, we did it. We're here. And I like broke down crying. Mitch took so many photos of me like bawling my eyes out with him on my chest. And just, that was the first time where I'm like, okay, we're past everything.
That was it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And now it's like obviously very real.
It's yeah, like it's still like sometimes we'll turn around and be like, I can't believe he's here after all of that, but it also, everything kind of feels like a blur of what we went through, all the craziness.
I use your story a lot as an example when patients don't respond well to stims.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, I say this so much and it's so annoying for people, but I'm not in any way anti-IVF.
And I'm still not either.
Yeah,
I know so many
way.
people that it worked for. I just, especially at certain points, it was like, this just does not feel like it's ever going to work for me.
I emphasize a lot to other people as well. Like, I could never have done IVF, and I have 6 kids. Like, it was horrible. I had to go through 5 miscarriages in that process. Like, that was my selection, if you will, in terms of like, you know, viable versus non-viable embryos. And that was really a hard process to go through. But some patients with low AMH, like, you're just not going to retrieve eggs that are going to be fertilizable. And even when they do, sometimes the mitochondrial energy of those eggs, they're not going to do very well outside of the body. So, I mean, now that you've had him, are you like, do you have more body belief? Like, do you think that for your second one, you'll go into it with a different mindset? You like how I've already assumed you're having a second one?
Yeah, it definitely helps with the confidence because, like, my body did it once successfully. So definitely feel better. And we have so much experience of IVF and medication not working. So it obviously helps the confidence because we've been through it now.
Yeah. It's also, and I think in the story, it would be easy to be like, well, you know, when you were trying to spontaneously conceive in the beginning, it didn't work either. So, but that's the part that I want people to really understand is like when you start working on the cells that you're going to use to make up your tiny human. Like there was an embryologist the other day that posted the most annoying story about how like don't ever delay, you know, retrievals. Just go right into them. You don't need to prepare yourself, get ready to do an IVF retrieval. You can just go right into it. I'm like, that contradicts every single aspect of current science. What are all the supplements that the same embryologist had been recommending on previous stories? And what about like improving sperm quality? Like, how is that not part of the conversation? You can improve sperm quality so much over 74 to 90 days. And I think that was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Is that the two of you were just working away.
Yeah. And it really and still does upset us when people are like, oh, so like you just took a vacation and relaxed and it happened, when yes, it might seem like that's what happened, but like we had been working on our sperm and egg health for 2 years at the point when
Yeah.
we were able to conceive. So it's not, oh, we relaxed and it happened. It's we changed everything. We were on supplements for years. We weren't drinking. We were doing acupuncture. So
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
yeah, I don't want the story for that to be the result. It very much was not, oh, we relaxed and it happened. We worked really, really hard.
And I think a lot of the time that's just something that makes other people more comfortable.
Yeah.
Is that storyline of like, oh, well, like if you just chill out,
Mm-hmm.
it'll happen. It's like, no, most of the time when people have chilled out, it's after a tremendous amount of effort on their behalf.
Yeah.
And it's really like, it does a huge disservice to those parents because they were working so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't know, I feel like they earned it.
Yeah. So we'll still like shoot back at people when they say that and be like, well, actually,
You
no.
snap back?
more Mitch, but
I'm obsessed.
yeah.
Yes, I would love to be on the sidelines and watching you snap back. Do you have any final takeaways? What would you conclude for all of those? Because I was going to stop doing those stories a couple of weeks in, and you, every time you'd come into your treatment, would be like, what's happening with so-and-so?
Yeah. Did they get their
Like,
baby?
why are you still only 2 out of 4 of these stories?
Yeah. I liked the stories and I liked trying to find a story that resembled my story because that gave me hope. And I remember when you released certain stories, you would message me and be like, oh, you'll like this one. She had an ectopic and like she got there. So I found that really helpful. But I think just whatever they need to do for themselves to get there, it's okay. And yeah, like you just have to take care of yourself. So if like you have to withdraw and be alone or you like going out, whatever you have to do.
Just do it
Yeah.
to get through.
Yeah.
Would you change anything?
I wouldn't, but like if I had known IVF wouldn't work, I probably wouldn't have done it 4 times, but I don't regret the steps that we took because we still very much believe that it works for people, but it just wasn't right for us. And once we felt it wasn't right, then we could move on to something that would work.
It's so hard, though, also just in the rhetoric of today's society
Yeah.
that there aren't a ton of stories where people say, like, hey, IVF didn't work. But if you look at the statistics, it's 44% that does.
Yeah. And if you look back on our pregnancies too, I was pregnant. He was my 6th pregnancy. I had 5 losses and all 5 were in fully non-medicated, unassisted cycles.
Yeah.
I never once got pregnant through an IUI or a transfer.
No, and I think that's really powerful so that people can look at their own history and their own patterns and see, because I see that all the time. Patients will come to me after a miscarriage and then they're doing IVF and IVF isn't working for them. And when I make the recommendation, well, what if we went back and started to optimize so that you could potentially try spontaneous conception? I think it's the lack of having dates and times.
Yeah, you just want to jump into whatever's next because you just want the
Certainty.
pregnancy now.
Yeah. And even the idea of like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm ovulating on the 25th, but like if I did a retrieval on the 25th, then we know for sure that eggs got fertilized.
Yeah.
And it's just in searching for that certainty. Even if it ends up that you didn't fertilize anything, at least you felt like you made a step forward.
Yeah.
And I think I had a friend who did IVF and she made a really important point to me. She was like, Anne, it's about the fact that you don't know what's going to be your happy ending. And so you don't want to say no to anything in case that's it.
Yeah.
That's your happy ending.
Yeah. And even after the 4th retrieval and transfer, that what felt like taking a step back was really hard. And I needed to process that a lot because it felt like less of an effort, like we were trying less, which wasn't the case. But
No, that was the bravest.
yeah, had to
part.
work through that with.
Yeah. That was the bravest part of your story.
Yeah.
Was when you decided to like count on yourself more than all of the support that you'd been receiving.
Yeah, that part was really hard. And
you kept going.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming, sitting and having coffee, bringing me a baby to hold.
Yeah. Sorry, the baby did not sleep outside of frame.
The number of times I mentioned as we prepared to do this, maybe someone could hold him.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And then I was like, I can hold him. And you're like, oh, or I could
or
hold him.
me, perhaps, if I must.
Yeah.
This was what I originally. Ryan's not even recording anything. This was just a ruse for me to get to hold your baby for a very long period of time.
It worked.
Well, because otherwise people they're like, I'm gonna come visit you in clinic, and then they come, they let me hold their baby for 5 seconds, they take a picture, they post it on social media, and then they leave, and I never hear from them again.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so thrilled for this like extremely happy ending. Thank you so much for listening this week. Every time that you listen, you share, you rate, you review, it helps boost our show, which not only gives me the motivation to carry forth, but also helps attract new guests with new information. So thank you so much. Please don't forget, again, rate, review, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode.